Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and after a very, very long break, I have returned to Marcus Didius Falco. Book 16, we will be we're not too many books away from the end of this series, after which I will have to think of something else. But anyways, for anyone who was actually waiting for this, all one of you, thank you for your patience in waiting for me to return to this. So Scandal Takes a Holiday is another sort of genre type leap, because, yes, these are sort of marketed, I've said it before, these are marketed as being more or less murder mysteries, but they're not all murder mysteries. This one starts out as a simple missing persons case, and indeed Falco starts off not even really thinking that the person that he's looking for is necessarily even dead. Basically, he gets hired by a broadsheet that effectively works for the Imperial Palace. That what they do is they put out, it's sort of a newspaper broadsheet thing, but it is supported by the palace, and so everything in there, while, as true as may be, is nonetheless sort of reviewed by the government. Anyways, so their gossip columnist, who, talks about all of the scandals with, wealthy young women who got caught in the wrong bedrooms and whatever scandal things seemed to sort of cross his path, he has gone missing. And the people where he, and some of his fellow newspaper people have basically hired Falco to head out to Ostia and find out where it is that this man has gone. So Falco heads out there, and he, as is his wont in these books, takes his common-law wife Helena and their two children, one of whom is now thoroughly a toddler and the other of whom is several months old, so they're both capable of being very, very noisy and a certain amount of incredible, the kind of trouble that, toddlers and babies can be. They also have adopted a young woman, because during that trip out to Britain, the trip in which we find out that two of Petronius's 3 daughters have died, and a whole bunch of other things. During the course of that trip, they wound up with this young woman, this girl. She's a teenager, and she had basically been living on the streets because following the revolution, the resistance, rebellion, whatever, of Boadicea, Boudica, whatever form you want to consider her name to have been, there was a moment in Roman history, basically, where after they had taken over the British Isles, there was a series of rebellions, and one of those was by Queen Boadicea, as she is popularly known among many of the Anglophone population. And she basically, after apparently her tribe had more or less cooperated with the Romans, and then, and I am not 100% sure of the details of it, but they're in another historical novel that I read that I will not be doing for this just because the whole thing makes me way too sad, that there was some kind of abuse of power that the Romans had done. In that novel, they said that her daughters had been raped by Romans, which would not surprise me in the slightest. And so she and her tribe basically said, okay, we're going to rampage and drive the Romans out. And so they went through places like Londinium and destroyed everything in their path that they could get their hands on. And the Romans were, as with many peoples who invade other territories in the effort to pacify and civilize them, they get taken sometimes by surprise when the locals get upset at being pacified and civilized and strike back and murder everybody in their path. And it is tragic. Yes, of course they had reason to rebel and reason to try to drive out the interlopers. I would never say otherwise. But the fact is that by that point in time, you have Roman families and civilians who have moved in there, people who, whether or not the Romans are an invading force, they don't know any better. They're just civilians who have been told by their trusted government that there is free land to move into and farm and put up shops on. And so when they go through the town and they rape, loot, and pillage their way through out of vengeance, you have these families who get murdered, and it is a absolute historical bloodbath. And so this young woman, she had been a baby at the time that this had happened, and she's been on the streets ever since, and nobody actually knows whether she is, whether she is the child of a slave, whether she is the child of a Roman, whether she is the child of, of one of the Celts, whether she is a half and nobody knows. But she knows Latin, and they have taken pity on her because, she's basically been living on the streets with nothing because of this horrific slaughter that happened when she was a baby. And it's sort of one of those things where her lot in life is terrible in a way that is entirely possible, that it was completely unfair that she could have been the family of an upper middle class Roman, merchant who had just been in town that day, and nobody will ever know. So she's basically come with them and is now acting as their nanny. And so they come to Ostia and they bring her with them. So you sort of, it's basically this big ostensible family trip. But in point of fact, it is just an excuse for Falco to look into this. And as he looks into it, he finds out that the local cops, the vigiles from Rome sort of take turns rotating through Ostia. So it's the 6th vigiles cohort who have been in there up until recently, and they are to be swapped in for the 4th, which is the one that Petronius is for, and Petronius is there sort of to survey in advance of his, of effectively his cops showing up. And Falco is pretending to be on a vacation when he's doing this. Anyways, so Falco finds out that the 6th, that those vigiles have basically been corrupted or have just been going along with or something with this scheme run by Cilician pirates. This is, of course, complicated by the fact that several years, that, a decade back or more, one of the, many, many years ago, one of the previous Roman emperors had, when he was leading various military jaunts, had gone through the region of Cilicia, and there are no more Cilician pirates. There are just honest Cilician merchants in boats who, do high-risk trading, to quote Avatar: The Last Airbender. Anyways, so you have that, and so Falco can't just point at people and say, these are pirates, Not merely because you can't point at people and make unfounded accusations, but also because there are quote-unquote no more pirates. The head of the local navy winds up involved. Like, there's this whole complicated thing, and throughout all of this, we wind up with this complicating factor of one of Falco's uncles on his mother's side, who vanished years ago, and the rumor was that he got on the wrong ship, and that he left because he was possibly wanted to be a woman, or maybe liked little boys too much, or there were a lot of bad implications. In the end, it turns out, or at least the way this book pans out, it appears that it was none of those things. He's just gay. And he left to be with the man that he was in love with. He's also claiming to be an Imperial agent, which Falco, frankly, has very little patience with, because, you know, this becomes one of those things where if this man is an Imperial agent, this has put both of them at complete odds and screwed up both of their investigations, because both of their investigations could have gone much, much better if they had both been able to share information. And while Falco was open and everybody knew what he was doing, his uncle Fulvius was not open, and so, you know, there was no sharing of information, and even when they get stuck, trapped together in a tiny enclosed space, hiding from the bad guys and so on, you know, Fulvius is still not being open with his information, and Falco just is so sick of this, because he, you know, he just wants to do his job, especially because he has found out that his missing person was quite possibly back in that place in order to get, you know, find the people and get back at the people, bring to justice, rather, the people who had been, in effect, the cause of his aunt's death. That he used to visit his aunt in Ostia. Her house had caught fire. He had gone to what he had thought were the local authorities to help with the fire. They had refused, and his aunt burned to death because nobody would help him. And he has been, you know, trying to, and he basically had just set out there to expose them, to find out what was going on, and then he would use his mouthpiece in the broadsheet to expose them for everything that they had done. And he tripped into this pirate kidnap, you know, conspiracy involving upper levels of the local navy and the police force and the local builders guild, and had been killed because of it. And Falco is particularly distressed because ultimately, and this is one of the biggest themes in this series, is that Falco is ultimately a very good person. He's somebody who is determined to do the right thing. He is determined to bring justice to those, for those who cannot speak for themselves. You know, it's a savage justice. It's an ancient Roman, we will let you be pulled apart by, you know, wild animals in front of a raving crowd sort of justice. But he is extremely determined to make sure that people who do bad things to those who didn't deserve it will get caught and will get theirs. And so, you know, finding out that this guy who was just trying to bring justice for his aunt who didn't need to die, and then also his co-workers who had come out there after being contacted by somebody who said, hey, we have your friend, and if you pay us this ransom, we'll give him back. And they had come out there, and they got caught up in it, and at least one of them is murdered terribly, and only because they were out there to give a ransom for their friend. This whole thing just sits very, very badly with Falco. So, yeah, that's everything I'm going to say, because I'm basically out of my self-imposed time limit. And I will see you all next week.